You really think anyone here cares about what you do, Claire? You stock shelves. That's all you'll ever be. I am Claire, and my brother Daniel said it loud enough for the entire table to hear. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Forks stopped in midair. It was his wedding day in Dallas, but somehow the spotlight always found its way to me, the family disappointment. I sat there in the hideous neon green bridesmaid dress his fiancée had chosen for me, fingers brushing the cheap pearl necklace around my throat. To them it wasn't an heirloom, it was a joke, a symbol of how I never measured up. They laughed, they toasted each other's accomplishments, and when it came to me, they offered pity. Pity for the grocery store clerk who never climbed higher, who never made them proud. But what they didn't know, what no one in that ballroom suspected, was that I wasn't the failure they imagined. I was holding a secret powerful enough to turn their smug smiles into silence. Before I tell you everything, let me know where you're watching from, because this is the story of how one wedding became my battlefield. Part 2, Flashback. Segment 1. 602. I wasn't always invisible, at least not to everyone. There was a time before everything broke when I was still someone's first choice. When I was 8, my real mother still waited with me at the bus stop every morning. She wore a red wool coat that smelled faintly of cinnamon gum, and her hands were always warm even in December. She'd crouch down, tug my scarf tighter, and kiss the top of my head like it was the most natural ritual in the world. That was when she fastened the little pearl necklace around my neck for the first time. The pearls weren't perfect, slightly scratched uneven, but she whispered, "Keep this close, Claire. When you feel alone, touch it, and remember, I'm right here." She died 3 months later. After the funeral, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. The walls echoed, the kitchen smelled different, and silence hung heavy like fog. Then came Margaret, my father's new wife. She didn't storm in like some wicked stepmother in a storybook. No, Margaret smiled too much, complimented too sweetly, rearranged the house until my mother's things disappeared piece by piece. By the time I noticed, the photographs were gone from the hallway and her red coat had been donated to someone who needed it more. All I had left was the necklace, but Margaret gave Daniel everything else. The first time I realized the new rules was Daniel's 10th birthday. Margaret threw him a party at the Country Club Balloon's magician's cake, layered like a skyscraper. I had been promised I could go too, but when the car pulled up, the seats were already full of Daniel's friends. Margaret shut the door with a quick, "Next time, Claire." Her lipstick smile vanished before the door clicked shut. I stood there in the drizzle, wearing a dress we couldn't afford, pearls biting into my collarbone, watching their taillights disappear. The rain soaked my socks until they squelched in my shoes. Hours later, Grandpa James found me at the bus stop, shivering with the necklace wound around my fingers. He didn't scold or ask questions. He just draped his heavy army coat over me and carried me inside. That silence told me more than words ever could. He knew, but he couldn't fix it. From that day, favoritism wasn't a secret, it was law. Daniel's scraped knees were adventures. My good grades were obligations. If he slammed the door, he was spirited. If I forgot a chore, I was disappointing. Every difference was tiny, but stacked together, they built a wall I could never climb. At dinners, Daniel was the golden boy telling stories about soccer practice while I refilled glasses and cleared plates. "Claire's so helpful," Margaret would say with a smile too tight, as if usefulness was the best thing I could hope for. My father stayed quiet, and silence, I learned, can wound deeper than cruelty. I grew smaller year by year, shrinking into corners no one noticed. But even in that shrinking, I learned to watch, to remember, to endure. And I didn't know it then, but all those silent years were sharpening me for a moment none of them would ever see coming. By the time I turned 16, I had perfected invisibility. Not the kind where you vanish, but the kind where you're present enough to be useful and quiet enough not to be remembered. Holidays were the worst. At Christmas, Daniel unwrapped new sneakers, video games, and cash envelopes. I got sweaters 2 sizes too big, usually wrapped in reused paper. "You're practical, Claire," Margaret would say, handing me the box with a smile. And every time I tried to protest, my father would glance at me with that tired look, the one that begged me not to make things harder. There was one night I'll never forget. Junior year. I came home waving a letter. I'd been invited to a regional science fair after winning first place in our school competition. It felt like proof that I wasn't as small as they thought. I walked into the dining room ready to share. Daniel was already at the table telling everyone how he'd scored a goal at practice. Margaret clapped beaming and served him extra roast chicken. When I slid the letter across the table, she barely glanced at it. "That's nice, Claire," she said, already pouring Daniel more soda. My father muttered "good job" without looking up from his plate. The paper wilted in my hands. Daniel winked at me across the table, a smug little curve of his lips that said, "See, you'll never matter more than me." I stopped bringing news home after that. Instead, I started spending nights at the 24-hour Walmart down the road stocking shelves for extra cash. To my family, it was more proof that I was the worker bee with no ambition. But to me, it was a classroom. I studied how shipments arrived, how inventory rotated, how demand rose and fell by season. I learned more from scanning barcodes at 3 a.m. than I ever could from textbooks. One night around 4 a.m., a manager caught me sketching out delivery routes on scrap cardboard during break. He asked if I wanted more hours. I just nodded, slipping the necklace back under my shirt. No one in my house ever knew that those long nights were laying the blueprint for something much bigger. Still, the whispers spread. At family reunions, cousins nudged each other Claire's working at the grocery store. Aunt Linda patted my hand with a pitying smile as if my life were already decided. I let them believe it because correcting them always ended in laughter or disbelief. "You logistics," Henry once chuckled. "Don't be ridiculous." The truth, I was building something brick by brick, learning in silence while they mistook me for small. Looking back now, I can see the irony. They thought they'd erased me, but really, they'd given me cover. Every cruel laugh, every dismissive sigh, every time I was overlooked, it all became fuel. I just didn't know then how violently those buried cracks would split open years later under the golden lights of Daniel's wedding. The wedding in Dallas was supposed to be Daniel's big day, but I knew from the moment I zipped up that neon green bridesmaid dress, it would become something else. It clung in the wrong places, reflected the ballroom lights like a highlighter pen. I caught my reflection in the mirror and almost laughed. It was too obvious Evelyn or Margaret had picked it out to make sure I looked like the odd one out in every photo. By the time I walked into the Fairmont's grand ballroom, the air was already thick with perfume and performance. Evelyn's family filled the front tables, lawyers, judges, startup millionaires, every one of them shining with the confidence of people who'd been told all their lives they mattered. My family sat opposite, stiff in their chairs, scanning the room as if tallying reputations. Dinner was served with silver lids lifted in unison. Toasts followed one after another, voices clinking glasses celebrating achievement like it was oxygen. Daniel lifted his champagne flute, smiling that same smug smile he'd worn since we were kids. To Evelyn's family, he began a shining example of success. To her father, who built an empire from nothing, to her brother, who sold his company for more than most of us will ever see. Applause rippled. He turned, then eyes finding our side of the room. And to my family, Uncle Mark, who just made partner at his firm, Cousin Henry expanding his dental practice, Mom, the heart that holds us all together. His gaze landed on me, and for a heartbeat he hesitated. Then the smirk returned. And to my sister Claire, who flew all the way here from Chicago despite the cost. She works at a grocery store, honest, humble work. In a world obsessed with status, she reminds us that dignity doesn't come from titles. Polite applause followed. The kind people give at charity dinners. I could feel eyes on me, pitying, grateful eyes like I was some living lesson in humility. Heat rose in my chest, but I smiled. Always smile. My hand found the necklace at my throat, the pearls pressing into my skin. I thought of my mother's whisper, "Keep this close." I was used to being overlooked. I wasn't used to being paraded like a mascot for failure. I sipped my water, heartbeat hammering, and wondered how much longer I could hold my silence. But I didn't know the night wasn't finished with me yet. The real blow was still waiting just outside on the terrace. I slipped out onto the terrace, desperate for air. The December night was damp, the Dallas skyline blurred by a thin drizzle. My heels clicked against the stone floor as I moved toward the railing, hoping the cold would cool the flush burning up my neck. That's when I heard them. voices carrying from the corner near the bar. But Evelyn mentioned she wants Claire as godmother someday. Her mother was saying, her tone sharp with concern. Is she stable? I mean, financially? Daniel chuckled low and easy. She's sweet, but Claire can barely take care of herself. Same grocery job for 7 years. No promotions, no ambitions. Mom helps with her rent. We all chip in sometimes. The words punched the air from my lungs. I gripped the railing until the metal bit into my palms. I had never taken a dime from any of them. The lie rolled so easily off his tongue, I almost wondered if he believed it himself. Evelyn's mother sighed in relief. I worried about the influence. Patricia's children need role models, Daniel. People who actually achieve things. Exactly, he said. Claire's basically the family charity case. We love her, but she's limited. I froze there, rain needling my skin, listening as my own brother carved me down into nothing with casual words. And it wasn't just him. A few feet away, I caught Cousin Henry laughing with Evelyn's relatives. Did you see Claire's car? 15 years old, barely running? She's probably on food stamps. My mom thinks she might have some learning disability, explains why she's been stuck so long. Laughter answered him, light and cruel. My stomach knotted. I wanted to storm over to scream, but I couldn't move. Instead, I stood anchored by the pearls at my throat, my mother's voice echoing in memory. When you feel alone, touch this. I had thought I was hardened to their contempt, but in that moment I felt stripped bare. Not invisible worse. Visible only as their punchline. Inside, music swelled as the DJ called couples to the dance floor. Laughter and clinking glasses spilled through the open doors. And then Daniel's voice rang out again, amplified now, as he tapped his champagne glass for another toast. I straightened the drizzle sliding cold against my skin and walked back into the light. My brother's eyes locked on mine, pity written across his face as he raised his glass. Not everyone can be successful. Some people remind us of simpler values, he said. To Claire. The applause cut like knives. I lifted my chin, smiling thin and cold, even as something inside me finally broke. What Daniel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't planning to stay silent anymore. And I was about to do something that would change everything. The applause from Daniel's toast still echoed in my head as I slipped out of the ballroom again. But this time I wasn't running for air. I was steady, almost calm. Something had shifted. I leaned against the marble wall in the corridor, my phone buzzing in my clutch. One glance at the screen, a text from my head of security, David Martinez. Helicopter ready. 10 minutes notice. I typed back, stand by. My thumb hovered before hitting send. For years, I'd told myself silence was safer. That if I let them believe their own lies, I wouldn't have to fight for recognition I never needed. But tonight, Daniel had crossed a line. He hadn't just embarrassed me. He had cemented a narrative that would outlive me. Claire the failure, Claire the charity case, Claire the cautionary tale. I couldn't let that stand. As I re-entered the ballroom, I moved differently. No more shrinking, no more apologizing. The pearls at my throat felt heavier, sharper like a blade instead of a relic. I found my seat and watched silent as the music swirled and couples spun across the polished floor. Daniel basked in Evelyn's family's laughter. Margaret sat glowing with pride. Henry whispered another joke that made 2 bridesmaids snicker. I let them. Because while they laughed, I opened my phone beneath the table and pulled up a file from my private drive, the signed pre-merger documents for Bennett International's acquisition of Stratton Global, a deal worth $2.1 billion. The ink, barely dry, set to close at midnight Singapore time. If I wanted, I could release the news right then. One email to the press, one push notification, and my name would light up every screen in the ballroom. But I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. Instead, I slipped the phone away and let the plan crystallize. They thought I was powerless, but in truth, I had the power to decide exactly when the curtain would drop. That's when Alex appeared. I almost didn't recognize him. He'd grown sharper since college, a journalist's notebook sticking from his jacket pocket. Claire Bennett, he asked, tilting his head. His voice carried just enough to catch Henry's attention at the next table. It's been a while, I said evenly. Alex smiled faintly. I almost didn't believe it when I saw you on the Forbes list. I wrote that feature on female CEOs last spring. You were the quiet one with the biggest numbers. I wondered why you never wanted your picture published." Henry froze mid-laugh. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Because sometimes invisibility is the best disguise." He studied me a moment, then nodded slowly. "Are you ready for them to know?" I glanced across the room at Daniel, his arm slung possessively around Evelyn, his grin wide, the crowd still circling him like moths to a flame. "Soon," I said, "but not yet." Alex didn't press. He just slid a card across the table. "When you're ready, call me. I'll make sure the story is told right." I slipped the card into my clutch beside my phone. My pulse was steady now. They had no idea. And that ignorance, that smug, blinding arrogance was about to become my greatest weapon. I didn't storm the stage. I didn't shout. That would have given them what they wanted, confirmation that I was fragile, hysterical, incapable. Instead, I smiled. I danced with distant cousins. I sipped champagne. On the surface, I was the obedient background character they believed me to be. But inside, every step was a calculation. Margaret stopped me by the dessert table, her pearls gleaming under the chandelier. "You look tired, Claire," she said with mock concern. "Life at the grocery must be hard." I met her eyes calm. "Exhausting," I agreed. "But I manage." She laughed lightly, already turning away, missing the cold spark behind my words. The pearls around my own neck pressed into my collarbone as if reminding me armor, not ornament. I touched them and remembered the bus stop rain, the way Grandpa's coat had felt heavy but protective. Tonight, though, I didn't need saving. Tonight, I carried the blade myself. Half an hour later, I excused myself and slipped into the hallway. David was waiting in his black suit posture, sharp earpiece glowing faintly. "Ma'am," he said softly, "your Singapore call is in 90 minutes. The helicopter is fueled." "Hold," I replied. "Not yet." He didn't question me. He knew that look in my eyes. Back inside, I drifted toward the bar, close enough to overhear Daniel bragging again. "Claire's good with kids," he was telling Evelyn's relatives. "She'll never be a financial influence, but she's loving." They nodded politely. Some even smiled at me, as if I should be grateful for the crumbs. That's when the final piece fell into place. Across the room, Evelyn herself sat at the head table, flipping through a glossy magazine someone had left behind. She paused, squinting at a full-page feature. My feature. The article Alex had written only months ago. The silent titan of logistics, how Bennett International quietly redefined global trade. I saw her eyes widen, her gaze darting between the photographless column and me. She mouthed my name. I gave her a small, deliberate smile. Recognition flickered across her face, confusion chasing it. And in that moment, I knew the timing was perfect. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about proving them wrong. It was about reclaiming the story, about tearing down the caricature they had built and replacing it with truth so undeniable it would crush their arrogance under its weight. I straightened my shoulders, the pearls catching the light. The knife was in my hand now, invisible but razor sharp, and I was ready to cut. Daniel tapped his glass again, pulling the room back to him. The music faded. Conversations died down. He stood tall in his tailored tux, basking in the attention. "Tonight, we celebrate more than just love," he announced, voice carrying. "We celebrate family achievement ambition. We celebrate people who push forward, who set the bar higher." Cheers erupted, champagne bubbling. He gestured toward Evelyn's side of the room. Her father, a self-made builder of an empire. Her brother, a genius who turned code into millions. Her mother, a woman of justice who inspires us all. Applause swelled. He turned, sweeping his gaze to our side. And in my own family, Uncle Mark finally made partner after years of dedication. Cousin Henry expanding his dental practice. My mother, the heart of our home. And then, inevitably, his eyes landed on me. "And my sister Claire," he said, pausing just long enough for the pity to thicken in the air. "She works in grocery retail, honest work. Not glamorous, not ambitious, but necessary. In a world obsessed with success, she reminds us of simpler values. To Claire." The room raised their glasses. Applause rained down like judgment. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. Conversations stuttered. Glasses froze midair. Daniel's smirk faltered. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm, almost soft. "But I think you've made a mistake." Daniel blinked. "Claire, sit down. It's just a toast." "No," I said louder now, the weight of silence pulling every eye to me. "It's a story, one you've told for years, and tonight I'm ending it." Whispers rustled through the crowd. Evelyn's mother frowned. Henry leaned forward, eager for the show. I touched the pearls at my throat. This necklace was my mother's, the only thing I have left of her. Everyone else dismissed it as cheap, just like you dismissed me. But while you laughed, I was building something you never saw coming. Daniel let out a strained laugh. "Claire, this isn't the time." "Yes, it is." My voice cut through his. "Because I've listened to you rewrite my life long enough. You told everyone I'm a failure, a burden. But the truth is, I'm the founder and CEO of Bennett International Logistics." Silence. Thick. Unbelieving. I pulled my phone from my clutch, tapped the screen, and projected a live feed of the financial news app onto the ballroom's display screen. The headline flashed, "Bennett International finalizes $2.1 billion merger with Stratton Global." Gasps rippled. Evelyn's father stood, his eyes narrowing. "You, that's you." "Yes," I said evenly. "The grocery store job, that was my research. I worked nights stocking shelves to learn logistics from the ground up. Today, my company operates in 47 countries, employs over 80,000 people, and moves 30% of Fortune 500 goods." Henry's jaw dropped. Daniel shook his head, face draining of color. That's impossible." From the back, Alex stepped forward, holding up the magazine Evelyn had just read. "It's not impossible. It's printed. I wrote it." Forbes called her the silent titan for a reason. All eyes turned back to me. The pity was gone, replaced by shock, confusion, shame. I smiled faintly. "So, when you toasted me as the family failure, Daniel, you toasted the woman whose name will be on tomorrow's front page." The ballroom erupted into whispers, half disbelief, half awe. Daniel tried to recover, voice tight. "Why didn't you ever tell us? Why hide?" I looked at him steady. "Because you never asked. You never wanted the truth. You only wanted the version that made you feel bigger." The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time in years, I wasn't the invisible one. I was the storm in the center of the room, and the storm was just beginning. Daniel's face flushed red, then pale, then red again. He looked like a man drowning in a room full of people who had stopped pretending not to watch. "You lied," he spat finally. "All these years you let us believe, I let you believe what you wanted." I interrupted, voice cold but steady. "Because every time I tried to explain, you laughed. You nodded politely and changed the subject. You liked the story where I was beneath you. It kept you comfortable." Margaret shot up from her chair. "Claire, stop this nonsense. You're embarrassing your brother." I turned to her, the woman who had perfected erasing me, with a smile. "No, Margaret. He embarrassed himself when he stood here and told a ballroom full of people that I was the family charity case. He humiliated me for applause. Tonight, the truth embarrasses him, not me." A hush swept the room. Evelyn sat stiff beside Daniel, clutching the magazine like proof in her hands. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Daniel, you told me she stocked shelves," Daniel stammered. She said she worked in grocery retail logistics," I corrected sharply. "I said logistics." You never listened beyond the first word. Henry tried to laugh, a weak sound. "So what, you're rich now, big deal." I turned to him, my gaze sharp. "Big enough that your student loans are financed by one of my subsidiaries. Big enough that the equipment in your dental office was shipped through my roots. You've been living off my work without ever knowing it." The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Evelyn's father cleared his throat, his booming voice breaking the tension. "Miss Bennett, I'd like to speak with you privately about future contracts." "My company could," Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "No, this is my wedding, not her press conference." All eyes snapped back to him. He was unraveling his polished facade, crumbling. Sweat glistened on his forehead. Evelyn pulled her hand from his arm. "Why does it bother you so much?" I asked quietly, though my voice carried across the ballroom. "Is it because you built your entire identity on being the golden child, and the thought of me outshining you makes you choke?" Daniel shook his head violently. "You've deceived us." I deceived no one I cut in. I showed up. I worked. I stayed silent because I thought family mattered more than recognition. But you took my silence as proof of failure. That's on you, not me." The room went still. For a moment, all I could hear was the clink of a fork dropped on porcelain. Then, Grandpa James rose slowly from his chair. He hadn't spoken all night. His voice was raspy but strong enough to carry. "I always knew you had steel in you, Claire. Your mother would be proud." The words landed like a verdict. The old soldier had spoken, and nobody dared to argue. Daniel's mouth opened closed. Margaret reached for his arm, but he jerked away, his composure collapsing. Around the room, eyes shifted away from him toward me. Respect glimmered where pity had been. For once, Daniel wasn't the center. He was the shadow. And the silence that followed was louder than any applause. I didn't stay to see Daniel stumble through whatever excuse he tried to make. I didn't need to. The damage was done, and not by me, by their own arrogance collapsing in on itself. David appeared at my shoulder like clockwork, murmuring, "It's time." His calm presence cut through the last threads holding me to that room. I slipped out the pearls cool against my skin, the ballroom still buzzing behind me. Somewhere inside, Margaret would be whispering frantic damage control, Henry would be hiding behind a drink, and Daniel would be unraveling under Evelyn's questioning gaze. For the first time in my life, none of it was my problem. The elevator ride to the roof was silent, except for the soft jazz piping through hidden speakers. It felt almost absurd after the storm I'd just unleashed. When the doors opened, the December drizzle kissed my face. The helicopter waited blades, whirring lights glowing against the night sky. David steadied me as I climbed in. "Singapore?" the pilot asked through the headset. "Not yet," I said. "Stop at the office first. I'm changing out of this dress." David cracked a rare smile. "Wise call. That color does you no favors." As the city spread beneath us, Dallas glowing like a circuit board, roads pulsing with headlights, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for years. They thought they'd broken me by erasing me, but all they had done was give me the quiet space to build something far bigger than their imagination could hold. The necklace pressed warm against my collarbone as the helicopter tilted north. I touched it gently, not as armor this time, but as a reminder my mother's love hadn't just survived, it had fueled everything. Tomorrow the headlines would run. Tonight, I was free. Back in Chicago, the office lights still burned, though it was past midnight. My team was on a video call with Singapore, their faces glowing on the massive screen in the boardroom. I walked in wearing a tailored black suit I kept for nights like this, power stitched into every seam. Ms. Bennett, my COO, greeted relief flooding his features. "We're ready to finalize." We closed the merger in 40 minutes. 18,000 jobs secured, a new continent added to our network. When the signatures flashed across the screen, the team erupted in applause. Their joy was pure, not pity. It reminded me that this was my real family, the one I had chosen, the one that believed in me without needing to be convinced. When the call ended, I lingered in the empty boardroom. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass reflected in the table's polished surface. I unclasped my necklace, running my thumb along the worn pearls. For years, it had been my shield. Tonight, it felt like a torch, something to carry forward, not just hold on to. I thought of Daniel's stunned face, Margaret's silence, Henry's disbelief. They had written me off so completely, they never bothered to look closer. And now they would have to live with the knowledge that the sister they mocked was the very force shaping the world they lived in. That was justice, not revenge, but exposure. I slid the necklace back on, not to hide, to honor. By dawn, news alerts were already flooding in. Bennett International completes historic merger. My name ran across ticker tapes, my photo finally replacing the blank space in Alex's old article. The story wasn't theirs to tell anymore. It was mine. I poured myself a glass of water, savoring the quiet. For once, I didn't need their approval. I had something better, my own voice, sharp and steady, finally free. They thought erasing me would make me small. Instead, it made me unstoppable. So let me ask you, if your own family refused to believe in your success, would you still fight for their approval? Or walk away for good? Before I close this chapter, let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? If you've ever felt invisible at your own table, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything to us as we share more stories like this.